that I had my second dose of the Pfizer vaccine yesterday, and apart from a sore arm, I have been dealing with probably a small fever, a little bit of a headache, some tiredness, some drowsiness, some weakness. I had a fever last night, I believe a very, very small one. So, I went to bed, I slept it off, I woke up in a pool of sweat. So it's like, oh yeah, probably had a little bit of a fever. You could probably tell by my appearance if you're watching this on YouTube. I definitely do not look the best today. Admittedly so. I probably don't look the best. I probably look sweaty and gross. But I did want to put out an episode today. I wanted to use the energy that I had remaining in my system today to put out some content, make an episode, talk about some of the specific small things that I have wanted to talk about over the course of the week. And that's the other thing that has been kind of withholding me from making an episode, is I have not felt like there's been a lot of good news to talk about this week. When the leading story on ESPN a couple of days ago was the fact that Anthony Edwards doesn't know who Alex Rodriguez is, it's not exactly like that's the crown jewel of sports topics to talk about. And a philosophy that I've adopted with this show over the first 4 months of the show's existence is, if you don't have something to say, or if there's nothing that you want to talk about, you should try and not force it. Because not only is your take going to be bad if you force it, but it's also going to be probably not that interesting if you're having to find things to talk about and force yourself to talk about them. So that's kind of the philosophy that I have adopted over the past couple weeks. You've heard it as a kid. If you don't have something to say, don't say it at all. That's kind of what I'm feeling, more or less. So I'm going to use the remaining energy that I have in my system to try and drum up about 20 to 30 minutes of a show and talk about some select few things for you today. Again, I hope you guys have had a fantastic week. I'm not feeling that great because of the Pfizer shot, but we are going to get into the show today and just go with it and go straight on into it. I want to talk about Julian Edelman first and foremost to start off the show. And it's not going to be necessarily a positive thing, and it's not directed at Julian Edelman. I've got a bone to pick with the sports media at large. I've got a bone to pick, and it's something that's kind of been ticking me off recently, especially when it comes to the NFL. I am getting really tired of this Hall of Fame or bust mentality. Julian Edelman retired earlier in the week. His stats to end his career: 137 games, 620 receptions, 6,822 yards, 36 touchdowns, averaged 11 yards per reception, 66% catch percentage. He had a fantastic career, and he had a fantastic story of a career. Drafted as a quarterback in the 7th round by the Jaguars, was traded to the Patriots, then became a punt returner, then became Tom Brady's favorite clutch time weapon, and he had himself a fantastic career, and one that should be celebrated moving forward. A great story, a great person, a great competitor, and that's how we should remember Julian Edelman moving forward. But what has ticked me off and kind of irritated me is that as soon as Julian Edelman retired, we don't focus on the story as much. We don't focus on who he is as a person, what he has fought through to become the player that he was. Instead, it's an instant conversation on whether or not Julian Edelman belongs in the Hall of Fame, and I don't think that's fair to him, and I don't think that's fair to any other player that is retiring, has retired recently, that could be potentially in the Hall of Fame. Now, this isn't a question of whether or not he does belong in the Hall of Fame, because if you asked me today, I would say yes, he probably does belong in the Hall of Fame to some extent. He's not going to be a first ballot. Hell, he's probably not going to be a second, third, fourth, or fifth ballot Hall of Famer. He's probably going to be in the Hall of Fame maybe 15 to 20 years from now, in a point where the voting system or the football elite, whoever knocks on the door to get this person into the Hall of Fame, I feel like Julian Edelman will make it there one day for his fantastic story. But what has irritated me is the fact that as soon as this man retired, questions start popping up on every single major sports show, sports network. Does Julian Edelman belong in the Hall of Fame? And the majority answer has been no. And I'm saying, why are we doing this? Why are we holding this conversation? Now, I understand that it's the nature of all sports to compare people to one another. Hell, that's what the Hall of Fame is. It's comparing this person to a whole entire group of people and saying this person is better, he belongs in the elite class of Hall of Fame players. This is the celebration of the league. This person belongs in that conversation. This person belongs in that group of people. So it's not necessarily the fact that people are comparing Julian Edelman to everybody else. It's the fact that they're doing it right as the career ends. And it's a very recent mentality around, fandom of the NFL, and especially in sports media. It feels like there is such a Hall of Fame or bust society. And it's kind of ticking me off because where we should be celebrating Julian Edelman for his accomplishments on the football field, granted, yeah, no Pro Bowls, but his resume throughout his career and what he was able to do in New England as a person who has had to fight and claw his way into the position that he was throughout his career, why we are choosing to talk about why he isn't a Hall of Famer as opposed to the things that he was able to accomplish as this person, as this player, is what kind of ticks me off. Because people, will remember the catch that David Tyree made against the Patriots in the Super Bowl in 2009, right? David Tyree isn't a Hall of Fame wide receiver. And I feel like people are kind of gravitating towards that conversation with Julian Edelman as well, is that everybody's going to remember the trick play against the Ravens or going to remember the catch that he made in the Super Bowl, but they're immediately already writing Julian Edelman off as a non-Hall of Fame wide receiver. And I just don't think that's fair to him or to anybody else because the conversation comes, well, if Julian Edelman belongs in the Hall of Fame, then Hines Ward and Reggie Wayne and Andre Johnson, all of those people deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. And I guess the point that I'm trying to make, and I'm kind of just rambling at this point about why it irritates me, is it just puts too much emphasis on the herding mentality that is the Hall of Fame. If you're working on a farm and you have two separate, clumps of cows, right? There's the cow that's in the advanced plains, they get the extra good grass. They're recognized as being these really elite cows, I guess. They get all the benefits, they get all the recognition. That's your money-making cow right there. And then there's the bigger group of cows that's on the other side of the farm, where there are some really good cows, but the extra stuff that you need to get into that other group is what separates. And I think recently we're putting too much emphasis on the division between those two groups of cows and putting too much emphasis on saying, well, this person does belong or this person doesn't belong. That's not up for us to decide. And again, I recognize that this is the NFL. Part of the fun in realizing and analyzing players' career is the comparison that we can make and the conversation that we can have between one player and another. I just think it's very unfair that we are so quick to immediately say that person isn't a Hall of Famer instead of saying, wow, let's look at this guy's career. Let's look at this guy's career and see everything that he's done as a New England Patriot, as a football player, and as a man, what he's done for, him and his family and those he cares about outside of football. I guess that's the end of my rant. I was really ticked off to see all of these major networks, ESPN, Fox Sports, saying, oh, he's retired. He's not a Hall of Famer, though. He's not good enough to be a Hall of Famer. Like, why are we degrading? Why are we already beginning to, degrade the value of somebody's career like that? I just feel like it throws these players under the bus because it forces us to join the conversation and make a decision right away as to whether or not he is to be a Hall of Famer, when the reality is that this decision is not going to be made until 5 or 6 years, maybe even further than that, into the future. It forces us to throw players under the bus, answer the question early as to whether or not he is a Hall of Famer, instead of taking a look at this person's career in the grand scheme of things, the big picture, and say, wow, this was a fantastic career. Julian Edelman was a fantastic football player, and we should celebrate his career instead of trying to throw him into one of the two herds, Hall of Famer or not Hall of Famer. I guess that's really all that's inspired the rant to start off the show. And I know that I started off the show saying I'm going to try and put the remaining energy that I have in my system from feeling so weak with the COVID vaccine. I'm going to try and throw all my energy into the show, and I feel like I've already exasperated all of it. Hey folks, thank you so much for listening to this segment from the Hard-Headed Sports Podcast. If you enjoyed this segment, make sure that you drop a like on the video and a comment. It helps me out a bunch. And if you're interested in watching more segments like this from the show after the show has been completed, you should definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you're interested in listening to the entire show in its full-length entirety, you should listen to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. Once again, thank you so much for watching the video. My name is Nick Ryan, and I will see you all again very soon.